Hi there. We're going to get started with your first sort of introduction to relief printmaking. You're going to need quite a bit of stuff here, which will be passed out to you. Most importantly, I'm going to put the paper off to the side because we're not starting with that right away. I'm also going to put the ink off to the side because we're not starting with that right away. The colors that you use with the inks today really don't matter. Today we're just practicing. So pick any color that's passed out to you will work just fine. What we have here is the carving surface for our relief printmaking, which is actually a 1" by 1" rubber eraser. Few things to know about the eraser. They are delicate, so if we carve too deep or too many lines in them, they will start to crumble and fall apart. I would recommend carving 2 sides. Don't go any further than 2 sides or else it starts to crumble and fall apart on you. These are your carving tools. Take note that they might from a distance look like the exact same thing. If you look closely at the blades, let me try to get you a good view of them here. This is not super easy to do, but if you try to get a good view, you'll notice this one looks kind of like the letter V, whereas this one looks more like a really wide U. This one, the one that makes the V, is going to be really good for thin lines, whereas this one would be a lot better for things that we need to carve out, so big areas. So you're going to get an assortment handed out to your table, and you just kind of share with your neighbors and pick and choose which one you need. Pencil I also don't need right now. The Sharpie is for planning my design as well as putting an arrow on my stamp. So, because I have already mentioned that this is a very fragile surface, it's really not meant for printmaking, but it works really well if you follow the directions. I'm going to take my Sharpie and I'm going to draw a really simple design on one of the sides. I would say keep it between 2 and 4 lines maximum. Letters work great. Letters and numbers are fantastic. I'm going to work with the letter M. And I'm just going to draw, my goal is to try to get the letter to touch at least 2 of the 4 sides, if not all 4. And you'll see why when I go to show you what we do on the paper. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to draw, I think I'm going to do like a letter M. And I'm going to try again to touch as many sides as I can. I'm going to do a line there. And I'm doing a funky M. You can kind of keep yours simple. So I have the letter M here drawn on there. I've touched 1, 2, 3 sides, which is great. And I'm going to use my blades to carve out this M here. I want to use a combination of the two because I think it's interesting to have some thin lines and some thick lines. So I'm going to start with the U-shaped one. And what you need to know about these, they are blades. They are meant to cut through rubber and wood and linoleum, so some pretty sturdy materials. They can cut through skin if not used correctly. So the blades are kind of wedged in between here, and they are meant to use in sort of a plowing motion. So rather than digging, we're not digging with them like a shovel, and they're not turned over like this. You're also never really pulling or scraping. Think of it like a snowplow. So you're going to have it so that it's facing up this way. I keep my finger on the top, and you're just going to kind of move along in a slow sort of fashion. Always keep on the table. You never want to be doing it up here because you don't really know what's happening. You want to keep it nice and sturdy on the table. Number 1 rule of cutting with something that's a blade: don't have your fingers in the way in the line of cutting, and you don't run a risk of cutting yourself. Here's what I mean by that. If my fingers are positioned here and my blade is moving towards my hand and I accidentally slip or get bumped, it goes directly into my finger. If I put my fingers, for instance, if I'm trying to cut this line and I keep my fingers down here, as I'm moving, even if I slip, whoop, it goes into the air, not into my finger, so I'm in safe zone. So you're kind of going to be turning the eraser rather than turning your hand awkwardly to achieve what you want to do here. So I'm just going to do the big line here. And again, I'm applying a little bit of pressure and I'm keeping my fingers out of the way. So I'm going to cut like this so that it goes not into my finger but into the air. And I'm just going to apply a little bit of pressure. And I'm going to slowly scoop out that line. Notice the very tiny amount that I've taken out here. It's like a little tiny shaving. That's all you need in order to be able to make a print from it. I'm going to switch blades, and I'm going to use the tinier blade now. And I'm going to come in and watch how I kind of turn the eraser to achieve the right cut. Come in here and pull it so that I'm always cutting away from my body. Again, remove it. Again, keep in mind how thin and tiny the stuff is. We don't want, it doesn't need to be a super thick chunk. So I've carved out most of my M. You can still see a little bit of the Sharpie. It's no big deal. And I'm going to take it to my paper. So you're going to put your grid paper on the bottom. You're going to take your white paper and place it on top. And I'm going to use blue ink. Again, the color doesn't matter today. And a few things before I practice my stamp. On the opposite side of the M, so my M is here, on this side, so the M is on this side, on the opposite side, I'm going to put an arrow. It doesn't matter what direction that arrow is going. I just wrote an arrow on the back. So again, my arrow's on this side, right here. My stamp is on this side, so opposing sides of the cube. And I am going to come up with some arrow codes. And what I mean by that is you have 4 options. I can place it arrow going up. I can place it arrow going to the right. I can place it arrow going down. Or I can place it going arrow left. So I have 4 different options. I'm going to try a few. I want to try one that's, let's see, arrow up, arrow right, arrow down, arrow left. I want to try another pattern maybe where I go right, right, left, left. Left, left, right, right. Maybe I try another one down here where I go left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left. Maybe I want to try another one here. I don't know. I'm sure you're thinking of some different examples. Up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. So I'm just coming up with a series of arrow codes, and now I'm going to follow those arrow codes. So I'm going to stamp, and the first one is arrow up, so I want it to match over here. I'm going to go arrow up, and then I'm going to go arrow right. This one's arrow down, so I'm just following, I'm mirroring with this arrow. I'm mirroring with this arrow what the pencil arrow told me to do. Arrow left. So notice there's design number 1. Let's see how it differs as I change what my arrow does. This one says arrow right. I think my ink pad's dying out a little bit. Arrow left. Arrow left. Arrow left. Arrow right. Oops, sorry, left. Arrow right. So notice I'm getting different sorts of patterns according to what I'm doing with my arrow. I'm going to try this one down here. This one goes up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. So here's just a few. I can already tell I kind of am digging this one, what's happening here the most, kind of personal preference. But the point is to try to find out different things that this design can do depending on how you hold the stamp, what direction it's facing. So your job is to come up with, I would say at least 5 different, I have 1, 2, 3 here, come up with at least 5 different combinations with your stamp. And when you're finished with that, you can put your stuff off to the side and you can start part 2.